Good evening and welcome to Monday, March 20th, 2023's council meeting. We have no closed meeting this evening, so we will jump right into the recommendation that council convenes an open session at 7 p.m. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries. I do want to make a quick note that Councillor Dunstall unfortunately is ill, so she will not be able to join us, but Councillor Dunstall, if you're watching, we wish you a speedy recovery. And into our moment of reflection, we observe the International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination annually on March 21st to raise awareness about the negative impact of racism and promote equality and respect for all people regardless of their race or ethnicity. It is a day to recognize racial injustices and reflect on the progress made towards eliminating racism and discrimination while recognizing there is still work that must be done. Wilmot renews our commitment to working towards the elimination of discrimination, prejudice, and bigotry in our community, celebrating our diversity and the valuable contributions of all people from all races and cultures, and ensuring a more inclusive and equitable community for all. I will now turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson for the territorial acknowledgement.
We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant in the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you very much. Now, councillors, does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Okay, seeing none, we have two additions to the agenda this evening, and that is items 12.5, which is the petition for drainage works by owners of 1089 Huron Street, and item 12.8, which is the 2023 Municipal Budget Package, COR 2023-08. The recommendation is that the agenda as presented for March 20th, 2023 be adopted. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Bless you. Minutes of the previous meeting, the recommendation is that the minutes of the following meeting be adopted as presented, which are for the March 6, 2023. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that passes. We have no public meetings this evening, and we have one presentation, and I will take this opportunity to let the presenters know that they have 10 minutes to address council. And it is going to be REAP Green Solutions, and they're presenting on the impact report. So I'll now welcome Mary Jane Patterson and Patrick Gilbridge of REAP Green Solutions to present their annual report. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much. It's Gilbride, rhymes with Castle Kilbride, by the way. No problem. Can I just tell you to advance when it's time? Okay, perfect. Thanks. So hopefully I don't botch your name. And now, so Mayor Salonen and councillors, we're very glad to be here again, and especially to be back in person to present our most recent impact report. So next slide, please. So we recognize the challenge of climate change poses in the coming years. This is especially relevant as we've been reminded in the news lately that it's never been more urgent, as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report recently sort of highlighted. And because of that, we know that we need the community as a whole to take action. So we've set a milestone which we hope represents a much larger transformation in the community. That's what you can see here. It's by 2030. People impacted by REAP Green Solutions will have taken 10,000 meaningful actions to collectively shift our community to a resilient, low-carbon future. Next slide. And we're happy to report that we're over a third of the way to meeting our 2030 goal. These actions represent tangible steps that people in our community have taken towards on their own sustainability journeys. And then the remaining slides, we'll talk about some of those meaningful actions. Next slide. Home energy evaluations are a great example of this. As you can see, 465 homeowners had home energy evaluations last year, taking advantage of the new Greener Homes initiative from the federal government. 140 of those have already completed their upgrades based on our recommendations and have received incentives to help cover the costs. These are meaningful actions that achieve greenhouse gas reductions year over year. And we're very pleased to report growth in energy evaluations in Wilmot Township specifically. As compared to our last impact report, that's more than doubled the amount of participation. 16 Wilmot households undertook energy evaluations, and some of those have already sort of completed their retrofits, resulting in 2.4 tons of carbon reductions year over year. And they received $8,500 in incentive to support the work they did on their homes. And thanks to the Greener Homes program, those incentives were available to all homes, not just natural gas heated homes. Next slide. So we wanted to continue to encourage home energy retrofits. Last time we were at council, we said that we were working on a wraparound support for energy evaluations, and that's what this looks like. It's the design of a study that we undertook, which includes loans for home energy upgrades, and that's action 3.1.9 of Transform WR, which you should all have a copy of now, and Mary Jane will make mention of when it's her time to speak. An important outcome of this process is also the report that you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, and that's looking at equity in home energy loan programs. We've shared this report with a number of other jurisdictions across Canada because we're the first specifically to look at equity in these financing programs. Next slide. Our Healthy Yards and Neighborhoods programs are an important resource to adapt to climate change. We have developed a suite of online tools that show people how to naturalize their yards, which we know are the building blocks for climate-resilient neighborhoods. In select cities, we also have full-service offerings, including backyard tree planting, rain gardens, and our Bloom in Box fundraiser, which provides harder-to-find native plants which will thrive in our climate. And starting this year, we'll be collaborating with Let's Tree Wilmot and other volunteers to go out into our forests and collect local seed from native trees. And these seeds, we hope, will help us to grow and expand our tree canopy throughout the region with trees naturally adapted to grow in our climate. And I think I will turn it over to Mary Jane for the next slide.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to say a little bit about our broader outreach, and it can be the next, thank you, the next slide. Some of what we do is what we think of our entry points for environmental action. Things like the Zero Waste Challenge, Youth Cutting Carbon for young people, and some of the webinars and workshops that we put on. And you can see by the number of attendees that we had a lot of participation, even though COVID was still hanging on. We went totally online for our workshops and found a lot more participation as a result from people who may not have been able to make it out, or we may have had in-person workshops that were full already. So that was good learning for us over the period of COVID. And as we come out of it, we're noticing what people were excited about during that time. It was especially green space, being outside, gardens, tree stewardship, those kinds of workshops were really popular during COVID. And now coming out of it, we're going to keep a mixture of online and in-person workshops so we can try to make them as accessible as possible. Next slide, please. REAP co-leads the Climate Action Plan for Waterloo Region, along with our colleagues at Sustainable Waterloo Region. And Council endorsed our long-term climate action strategy in 2021, and that was Transform WR. We've been wanting you to have it at your fingertips, so I'm really happy to hear that it has landed on your desks. I look at it almost every day. It's our guiding light now, so I'm really pleased that you have it now too. As Patrick said, we hear today from the IPCC report how urgent this work is. So we are very glad to have everyone on board for this in the region. We're also working with townships to offer an education session for councillors and key staff, and that might be coming through you, Ashton. So if you haven't heard yet, it will be coming from Kira and Sydney. We want you to have feel comfortable with this report, answer your questions. You can see our sector committees there on the slides. We have 3 of them, and they did great work last year. A couple kinds of examples of what they focused on. Demystifying heat pumps for businesses and homes, and helping to look at equity in the cycling networks in the cities with the help of city staff. Our next step now is to release our re-inventory report. We've done an inventory as of 2020, and we are about to bring it to all the councils to show you where we are so far and talk about next steps, and that may already even be in your calendars. So you'll see us again soon. Next step. Here is the breakdown of our expenses by program, and a couple things that this shows us. One is you see some diversity in the programs that we offer, and that really helps people have different ways in the door on their sustainability journey. And the other thing is that there's almost an equal kind of balance between climate change mitigation, programs that reduce emissions, and adaptation, the kinds of programs Patrick was talking about, tree stewardship, rain gardens, pollinator species, those kinds of things. Next slide, please. And then here's how our revenue breaks down. And what Patrick and I are always looking at is what's the balance and the diversity there that helps REAP have a kind of steady foundation. And we have almost half our revenue coming from contract and fee-for-service work compared to grants and donations, and that really helps give us an even keel as government programs come and go. Next slide, please. We wanted to say a little about what's coming up for REAP. We invited a number of organizations in the region that work on tree stewardship and tree planting to come together, and we collectively put an application in, and we're successful in getting funding from the 2 Billion Trees program from the federal government. So that's going to lead to the establishment of a tree nursery where we can have our own locally grown seeds for the various tree planting programs that we provide in the region. And it's very much in its very beginnings now. So we'll keep you posted as we go along. And on the other side, you heard Patrick talk about equity in energy efficiency financing programs. And that really led us to ask the question, if a loan is not going to be the right answer for a household on a low income, what is? And we started looking into the issue of energy poverty, which is the term for any household that pays more than twice what the average Canadian pays for their energy bills as a percentage of their take-home pay. So it's been a very interesting exploration. That's a little excerpt of a map from energypoverty.ca, which we can't take credit for, but is a very interesting foundation for the research that we've been doing. We kind of dove deeper into that for our community, and if you want to know more, there's a blog on our website about this. That's a good starting point for thinking about what do we do next, and we included rural households in all of this. So the last slide is a very big thank you to the core funders that make all of this work possible. And Mayor Salonen, you are part of Regional Council, so I want to say a big thank you to you for the support of the region of Waterloo. It really is critical to have an even keel for an organization like ours. And we want to say a special thanks to the staff that we get to work with on environmental issues. Ashton brings a lot with insight and participation that we appreciate very much. So we want to conclude with an open invitation to talk sustainability anytime, or partnership or projects. We would love to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, do you have any questions before Mary Jane and Patrick go? Yes, Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I might get into trouble for not really asking a question because I wanted to thank you for all your work. I've used your program twice for my own house, and for anybody listening, I would certainly recommend it. So I could ask a question just so I'm not totally breaking the rules, but I wanted to affirm you, and I guess if there's an ask for us, I'd certainly be open to hearing some kind of ask from you. I think you're doing great work. I've attended some of your seminars. It's very good.
Thank you very much.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I would echo what Councillor Martin has just said. I have as well, in a previous home, used your services and seen my energy efficiency increase. So thank you for having the program available. But a question, the energy poverty report that you were referencing, you mentioned it's available on your website. I'm just taking a quick look. Is it a blog or where might I find that?
Blog, look at energy poverty. We took that bigger dashboard of all of Canada, which was created by another organization, and hired them to do a deeper dive for Waterloo Region and created a smaller kind of template and then wrote a blog to accompany that. So if you look under the blogs and energy poverty, you'll see just a kind of introduction and then a link. And what's been interesting to see is that lone parent households and seniors experience the highest percentage of energy poverty in their demographic. So that was revealing for us.
And just as a follow-up, if I may, how recent is that data? Is that something that you may tackle as a group moving forward?
It's 2016 census data, so we have been shopping around for money to update it, but haven't gotten there, but then wondered if we need to go as deep as we did the first time, so we're still figuring out how to update that. But I think it's enough to get conversations going in the region.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments, councillors? Well, thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to the information session that you mentioned Ashton will be giving us information on.
All right, our pleasure.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 11, the consent agenda. We will move on to the consent agenda, and if members of council have any questions and want to remove any items from the consent agenda, please indicate now, as we will not take questions on the consent agenda items unless they are requested to be removed to the regular agenda. Seeing no questions, the recommendation is that for the consent agenda items 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3 be approved. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. On to reports. We have quite a few this evening. The first one, 12.1, is the Communications and Engagement Strategy Update. We'll first get it on the floor. The recommendation is that report CAO 2023-03 be received for information purposes, and further, that staff be directed to continue working with Red Brick Communications on the next steps to finalize the township's communication and engagement strategy. May I please have a move by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu, and I will now call on Dana Stenia, our Digital Media Coordinator and Website Administrator, to introduce the report.
Through the Mayor, as you all know, effective communications is essential in municipal government and includes many benefits, including increased public understanding, trust, and participation. It facilitates better decision-making and enhances public engagement. In order to ensure these benefits for the township staff secured the services of Red Brick Communications to begin the development of a communications and engagement strategy in March 2022. Red Brick Vice President Andrea Montgomery and Account Manager Jacqueline Demers are with us tonight to present an update on the progress further to the details provided in the staff report. Once the presentation is complete, Andrea and Jacqueline will be prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you very much. And Andrea and Jacqueline, if you'd like to come up and present your report.
Thank you so much. I'm Andrea Montgomery from Red Brick Communications, and Jacqueline is here with me. And through you, Your Worship, we appreciate the opportunity to work with the township. As Dana mentioned, we've been working with you for several months now, and we want to just give you an update in terms of some of the progress that we've made on the communications and engagement strategy, and talk you through some of our next steps and hear any questions that you have. Given that this began with the prior council, some of the feedback, we'll go through some of the research that we heard, or some of the findings from the research, which will include feedback from the former council. So next slide. We'll just take you very quickly in the background. Essentially, there was a recognition during that phase 1 consultation with the Prime Minister's path that there was a need to look at revitalizing and looking at your communications processes and efforts and activities maybe in a little bit more detail to find out where there are opportunities to maybe do things a little bit better, improve, find efficiencies, look at resourcing, all of those things. And as Dana mentioned, we know that communities who have strong communications and that leads to better trust with the community. It leads to better engagement with staff. Staff feel sort of a part of the process. They are also core communicators on behalf of the township to begin with. So we want to make sure that they're engaged along the way and look at ways to support council as well in terms of the information that you have. So when you're doing your work every day with constituents, that you have information that you need as well. So we'll bring you up to speed on that. That was a big reason why we were brought forward at that time as well. Dana was brought on. And then we came to start working on this strategy. So this is where we are right now with really a goal at the end of the day to improve the engagement and communications that the township's doing locally here. So next slide is about goals. And our deliverables at the end of the day is to provide a strategy to you. We're also looking at a public engagement framework and toolkit, which will really help ensure that any engagement work is done strategically, is thought through. It's going to have some practical stuff that staff can use, so departments will look through and give them really the step-by-step for how to plan engagement so that it is meeting the goals that you need it to meet and that you're reaching the audiences that you need to reach, and in the fact of thinking through who are the main people that are going to be impacted, how do we get those to those groups in the best way possible. So we want to deliver something that's going to help guide those efforts as well. We've been talking about the current structure, the current resourcing, talking with Sharon about what the next steps are, and I understand that this council has also approved a communications manager position going forward, so we applaud you on that. We think that'll be a wonderful and significant step forward in terms of being able to enhance and elevate the work that you're doing so far. We'll be looking at policies as well along the way and then providing some recommendations as we go. Next slide. So really, this slide tells you sort of the work that we've done to date. So this is the methodology in terms of our research. We always start with research in terms of these projects. So we did lots of consultation with internal staff. We talked with the senior leadership team or the corporate leadership team. We talked to different communications leads that have been identified in different departments. We did a survey. We've done a public survey. We've spoken, and we'll get into the different stakeholder groups we spoke with. So we basically have a lot of inputs coming in locally. The other thing too is Red Brick's been around the municipal community for a good 20 years, and I myself actually come from public sector. I'm in Halton region, and I worked at the region for about 8 years. I was also the communications director at City of Cambridge I was the interim director there for a while, so I've been on the ground kind of doing that work, and have been able to bring the expertise that we have collectively at Red Brick, as well as that expertise that we bring here too. The other thing that Red Brick is a little bit unique to Red Brick is we have quite a vast municipal network of municipal communicators, and so when we do these projects, we often want to hear from them in terms of what are they doing right now. They face a lot of the same challenges that Dana faces on a regular basis, and in the work that you're doing every day. So we'd like to hear from them. What are the current things that they're working on? Where are they putting some investments from a communication standpoint? And we get some lessons learned in terms of that best practice stuff. So that's included here in where we're headed now. So next slide. So let's tell you about what we found out. Internally, just quickly, we did get 41 responses on the survey that we did. Next slide. And some of the high-level findings, we broke down a little bit, not throughout the whole survey, but managers certainly are feeling well-informed, which is not surprising. They're a little bit closer to either being engaged at this, in this room or, with their leaders. Where we do find that some of the staff are feeling that they would like more information than they're getting right now. There are things and mechanisms that are working well, such as all staff emails and word of mouth through information through their managers. So we're looking at ways that we can sort of beef up the things that are working and maybe find new ways to get that information out to them. There is a perception from majority of staff probably who responded that the community is probably not getting enough information from the township and they probably want more. They also believe that the town or that the community is well engaged and that they want to continue to have a voice in what's going forward. Certainly, as we're finding in a lot of communities, that online presence is really important and the social media presence and there's a lot of work to be done to combat misinformation that happens on social media, different groups that are up, and does the township have a strong enough voice in moments where there are key issues that are brewing, and there's certainly opportunity to increase that as well. Next slide, please. More consistent, again, this is sort of from the internal, more consistent communications, wanting to have a voice themselves in some of the decisions that impact them in the decisions that are being made as well. And then from a meeting, I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see that sort of the core pieces here, just that there's an opportunity to tell stronger stories both inside the building and externally to the community. So how do we get the community to understand all the good work that the township is doing, and how do we make sure staff are informed and are equipped to also be able to tell those stories on your behalf as well. Next slide. So in the research finding from the staff interviews that we did, so these are one-on-one conversations, there's a lot of key themes. If you want to go to the next slide, please. A lot of key themes that came through again. One of the key pieces here is we're looking at structure, as I mentioned. Certainly inside we want to make sure that there is more, that the processes are clear, who's responsible for what is clear, so we can sort of build on some of those things. We also, a key theme that keeps coming back is the need for more proactive communication, right? So we're sort of sometimes, and it's not surprising when you have a municipality that has one person who's holding a lot and doing a lot of work that she's trying to catch up on a regular basis. So where do we put some foundations in place where to make her life a little bit easier, to make sure that we're getting on top of some of these stories, that we're sort of flagging some of these things a little bit sooner. So that's what we really want to look to. Next slide, please. Now, when we talked to the councillors, the way we did this was having 6 individual conversations with each of them, and this was back in August. So, next slide. Key things that came through, for sure, were related to, understanding the roles and responsibilities, even between staff and council, and what does that look like. Again, that's not surprising. We see that often in communities where councillors are, they want to communicate and should be communicating on a regular basis with your constituents and making sure you have enough information. But what should be coming through the municipality as a corporation, and what should be coming through council, and what does that role and responsibility look like? So we certainly heard that, and wanting some sort of consistency there, more timely information, and making sure that you've got the quality information that you need to be sharing that information as well. Next slide. Certainly there was an overall feeling that leadership and where the township is going in general is going in the right direction, so that is certainly a positive sign in terms of some hope in terms of where we're going next. Opportunities to improve the website, social media, all of those things came through again. Next slide. So I'll let Jacqueline talk to you a little bit more about what we heard from the community.
Good evening. So I'm Jacqueline Demirs from Redbird Communications. I'm looking forward to presenting some of our research results, and I'm going to talk about the external research. So we put out an online community survey. We had 89 responses, which may sound like not a lot of responses. It's relatively typical, I'd say, with these types of surveys. The survey results, however, are also, our research is also informed by stakeholder group sessions, which allows us to get some more qualitative feedback from members of the community. But based on those 89 responses to the survey, an overwhelming majority, close to 82%, thought that they received too little information from the township. And about 18% thought that they received just the right amount of information, and no one thought that they got too much information. So there was a clear desire here for some more information coming from the municipality. You can skip ahead. So how do you stay informed about township matters? So respondents here were able to pick 3 answers, and we've just selected the top 3 here, and those top 3 are the Wilmot's website, which makes sense, the official township Facebook page, and also social media not run by the township. So we're thinking about, other Facebook groups, Twitter, places like that, and that is where a stronger need for communications coming directly from the town might play a significant role, because while of course people are going to talk in these other groups, it's helpful if they have some information somewhere to point to that comes directly from the township, just to clarify, facts and things that are happening, and then people can go off and have their own conversations. We can skip ahead. So specifically on the website and social media, so most respondents said they visited the website from time to time, but about 30% of them said the content is difficult to find. Top searches include recreation programs and services, recent news or public notices, including road closures, and council meeting information. 70% of those 89 respondents said that they are active on social media. There's no way for us to obviously extrapolate that to your community at large, but I think there's a good chance that the majority of Wilmot residents are active on social media. Most used platform is Facebook. That is common across all municipalities, I think, that we work with. I can't think of anywhere where Facebook isn't the top used platform by residents, followed by Instagram, Twitter, and then LinkedIn. And you can skip ahead. And talking about public engagement, and also, information needs. So generally, there was a sense that survey respondents desired more information about programs, services, events, road projects. They want to know what's happening, when, and where, that kind of key information, and it should be easy to find. The community generally was neutral about how well they feel engaged by the township, with 55% of respondents saying that engagement is very important. The top ways that people provide input to the town: online surveys, in-person/virtual meetings and open houses, focus groups, asking a question on social media, and calling the mayor or their councillor. It's also, these are people who are responding to an online survey and saying that they typically provide information by responding to online surveys. So that's also something to consider here with this group. But these are common ways, I think, across the municipal community that people engage with their municipality and provide input and feedback. And the next slide, please. So when we were asking about public input, how effective do you think the town is at providing opportunities for the community to give input? So really a satisfactory response right in the middle there. Half of the respondents gave a 3 out of 5, with sort of some on giving 1 out of 5 and some saying 5 out of 5. So I'd say that that is a good response, that the town is that people are generally relatively satisfied with the opportunities for engagement. And the next slide, please. So in addition to the online survey results, we also sat down with groups of stakeholders and some virtual focus groups that we conducted. You can skip ahead. And these are really helpful because obviously you can have conversations with people and get really into some qualitative feedback as opposed to just answering questions on a survey. So here's a list of the different groups that participated in these focus groups. And the next slide, please. So some of the key themes we identified here, there was an overall recognition that the town is moving in a positive direction, lots of comments about staff being caring and helpful and responsive. A lot of the groups that participated in the focus group sessions were part of other community groups, and several felt that the community could do more to celebrate success, volunteerism, and quality of life in Wilmot, so just more about telling Wilmot's story in a more positive way. Key places that people get information, essentially the same as those online survey results, the Township Facebook page, Facebook groups not associated with the town or not run by the town, Wilmot's website, word of mouth, other community groups. There was a desire noted for more consistent and high-quality social media content. And also, several people noted that their own groups that they belong to could be better leveraged to broaden engagement. So reaching out specifically to certain groups in order to get feedback on different initiatives. Let's skip ahead. So this was, again, speaking about the previous council, but there was some recognition that there was some division on the previous council. There's a desire for consistency, wanting to hear, the same thing from different people. Sometimes there were instances where people would call different staff members versus councillors and receive different information, and not always clear who they should reach out to. Again, the website was noted as being challenging to navigate. We also heard a couple of times the phrase "will not," and that there needs to be a culture shift away from that sort of negative connotation with the township. And several people also noted that they desired a more formalized approach to engagement, especially with equity-seeking groups, so that there are more diversity of voices at the table. We can skip ahead. And comparator municipalities. So we spoke with, I believe, 7 comparator municipalities, but we also drew upon our own research from doing other projects like this, and speaking with dozens of different municipalities across Ontario and in other provinces as well. And it's important to note when we look at comparator municipalities, we don't just want to look at ones that are sort of similar size and character or location as Wilmot. We want to look at other communities where maybe they have a really well-developed communications function, or they've done something really excellent with their approach to internal communications, so we can learn more about best practices and how we can take some of those lessons learned and apply them to our work in Wilmot Township. Let's skip ahead. So some of the key themes from these conversations we had with municipal communicators: a centralized approach to communications is the most common approach. We find that's true even outside of these 7 communities, and that it's really key that there's a strong relationship between the communications manager and senior leadership. So when I say a centralized approach, that's one communications department that manages communications for the municipality, as opposed to having sort of managers within different departments that deal with communications. Also, that within that department there would be at least one dedicated communications practitioner at the management level, and as Andrea mentioned, I think we were heading in that direction anyways, which is a positive thing and good to hear. Definitely reinforce the importance of the relationship between senior leadership and council. Council needs to be kept in the loop. They are the key link, obviously, to your communities and your constituents. Communications managers can provide support that help elected officials deliver quality corporate communications information. So if you know what Wilmot Township is going to be saying about a certain issue, then that helps you, formulate your own communications and talk to your own residents. And it's also important that there are clear rules for staff and elected officials. I can skip ahead. So taking a strategic approach to communications, we hear this time and time again, it means planning ahead and it means building trust internally. So that communications initiatives and actions are proactive rather than reactive, and that every initiative that is planned connects back to the municipality's mission, vision, and values. Clear processes for when and how to communicate play a key role in the overall strategic approach, so there's really no sort of running around and second guessing and wondering how do we approach this particular matter. We've already sort of got a playbook, and we can, proceed from there. And also importantly, there's no magic bullet to reach everyone. There's not one simple tool that is going to solve everyone's communications issues, unfortunately, but communications really do have to be audience-centric. So if that means in Wilmot Township, the majority of people are following you on your Facebook page, then that's really where you've got to focus your attention, things like that. Different tactics obviously need to be used to reach different groups. We can skip ahead. So this is a list of the 7 that we spoke to and some of their internal resources. So you can see the populations here go from, on the low end, just under 20,000, and on the high end to close to 50,000. And everyone on this list at least has at least 2 staff members in the communications department, going all the way up to 4 in Georgina, which is the higher population. And I'll hand it back over to Andrea to talk about some of the ways we analyzed all of this exciting information.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So in every project, of course, we take what we've learned and then we do our little SWOT analysis. So if you want to go to the next slide. Internally, we look at the strengths and challenges based on what we heard. I won't, again, read through all of these, but you can recognize that, on the strength side internally, we've got some positive changes that are happening. We've got some recognition that communications is really important. There's some investment being made in terms of being able to, move this project forward, and management is keen and feeling informed, and we really want to continue to move and take advantage of that momentum. And that we understand that this council too, in certainly your campaigns, we heard through Sharon and the leadership team that sort of public engagement, being transparent to the community, being accountable to the community, those were key themes that were brought forward during your campaigns, and is something that we understand is important to you. So we're happy to have that in terms of where we want to head with this, and we're looking forward to getting more of your feedback in terms of where we head with this strategy as well. In terms of the challenges, again, not surprisingly, when you have a municipality that's got one person trying to do as much as they can, processes or roles and policies and procedures and that kind of thing within the organization can be challenging and difficult to make sure that communications are consistent and proactive all the time, and that we've got some work to do in terms of getting to that proactive piece, getting more staff to feel engaged and involved, and ensuring that you've got the resources you need to continue. Next slide, please. So then when we look at externally and where we're hearing and what we heard from the community, you certainly have these groups that are highly engaged. They want to be engaged, they want to be informed, they want to participate however possible and even be leveraged. So that's excellent, because they are ready and willing to be there with you and be champions on your behalf, and work and collaborate with you as well. And that there is a positive, sentiment, I think, with the staff that are doing the work, that the community recognizes you have good staff that are doing really good work, and they're helpful when they engage with them, and they want to continue to build on that. So it's certainly something we can continue on. What's interesting too is you've got multiple print newspapers, so that does provide you some different options to reaching out. We've got lots where, in many communities, the newspaper world is disintegrating before our eyes. That's not necessarily the case here in Wilmot, so that's an interesting strength that you have. Social media for sure there are lots of opportunity to leverage that more, and now you've got a partnership with Region of Waterloo in terms of the engagement platform, which we're seeing being used in many municipalities in Ontario, across the Canada really. So that will be something you'll be able to leverage as you go forward. Challenges, of course, this sense of not quite enough information. Lots of media outlets can also actually make it challenging to get the word out and get it to the right place. Lots of social media channels also makes it difficult, because sometimes that dilutes information if you've got too much coming at people in different ways. We've got a bit of this Wilmot negative reputation that we want to combat a little bit more as well, so we want to move through that. And of course, the equity-seeking groups, that there is more work that obviously needs to be done on that particular side of communications as well. So those are sort of high level. We go into a little bit more detail within the strategy itself, but that gives you a flavor. So really this is kind of what we want to achieve at the end of the day, is the benefits that you get when you do communications well. And sometimes it's it feels like a bit of a soft skill in terms of what we're doing, because communication is largely about managing relationships, in the sense that it's a two-way conversation. It's in the sense that we are working on building trust, and that you're trying to reach your own organizational goals while meeting the public interest, right? And serving the public at the same time, showing accountability for the use of taxpayers' dollars, etc. So we really want to kind of get to a place where we're achieving all of these things, and when you do it well, you certainly can do that. Next slide. So what are our next steps? Next slide. This is it here. What we'd like to do is have a facilitated conversation with you to hear directly from this group now in terms of what are your goals, what have you been hearing from the public, from the community when you have your conversations, what are sort of some of the key goals and priorities you have in terms of communications and engagement, and what has been your experience certainly from the time that you've taken your seats on council, and what does that look like, and where do you see there's opportunities to do that better. So we really want to hear that from you before we go any further. After that, then what we tend to do, similar to a strategic planning process, is we look at what all that feedback was, and then give you some strategic priorities for communication specifically, and we build out what the goals will be, and we'll develop a 3-year kind of phased plan. I mentioned earlier about a public engagement framework that will come as well, and then we bring that whole thing back to you one more time, and you will see us again to hopefully approve and give some further direction on communications for the township. So thank you very much for your time, and open to any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that update. Councillor Cressman.
So in reading this through and listening to your presentation, certainly I think the question that comes to my mind is the tendency is always in public life to hear from the critics and not from the people who are considering you doing a fair and fair job. So how do you address that in terms of a forum or a vehicle to move forward and try to ignore the noise, so to speak, and glean what would be a bigger response?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, it's certainly there's always a balance there, right? And there's no question that commonly the criticizing voices are louder than the ones that are satisfied and mostly and generally can be happy, but you just don't really know because you don't hear from them as much. Is it just because they're apathetic, or are they actually engaged and they're just happy with the way things are? So yeah, that's a common theme that we hear, and I think it's really, really important, and certainly as we look at the public engagement framework and toolkit we'll be doing, that we hope that will help you take a more strategic approach when you are looking at opportunities to hear from the public, and that there are more, that you have more ways that you are beginning to hear from different audiences, and that you get to kind of open the door for more people to kind of engage with you and be talking with you. So we certainly want to be giving some further tools and coaching if needed to kind of help move the bar a little bit that way. We do caution, we do lots of counselor orientation training, and we talk about issues management, we talk about social media, and we have, I think we have one webinar we did for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario called When Facebook Attacks, and we can send you a link to a really good podcast that Brian did on this. He's the president through Municipal World magazine that sort of speaks to some of this stuff in terms of the angry voices that we're hearing and how you get sort of some balance there. And I think the caution there really is not to overreact to those few different voices, to take a step back and really open the door to listen to as many people as possible to get a stronger feeling. Do you want to add anything to that response? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, like Andrea said, it's about focusing on that that sort of middle group. There, you're going to have people that really like you and other people that are upset about lots of things, and keeping your communications as focused as possible on maybe the group that wants to learn more, that doesn't already have an opinion one way or the other, is important. Another thing is also using to build trust over time by using plain language, by communicating regularly. Like, those two things go a long way to create an environment where people feel heard and they feel like that you understand them. Of course, there are going to be instances in groups where it won't matter, but overall, I'd say, I think it's sometimes overlooked, but sort of simplicity, plain language, and consistency also helps just build the relationship between the municipality and council and residents, which can have some pretty positive outcomes just over the long term.
The other thing I'll add to that, and that builds off the consistency piece, is when this council is consistent, and when there's alignment between staff and council and what's happening at the leadership team and how the organization is moving and then how council is moving, that makes a significant impact and difference from what the community sees. And they recognize when that relationship is doing well and is going well. And of course, it's fine to disagree. What we always say is that, disagreement is good, but good councils disagree well. Right? So that's the point where there is, respect at the table, people's voices are heard. Once a decision is made, we all move forward together, that kind of stuff. That makes a really big difference in terms of what the community is seeing and in terms of how they respond. And over time, like Jacqueline says, that can make a difference in terms of moving that little will not culture, hopefully, in the right direction. Does that help?
Well, I don't want to dominate the communication. I guess the other question would be, who speaks for the township, and how do we is it through the mayor? I should have said through you, Mayor. I have this added comment, but I did miss the orientation, so all of this might have been covered, and so I apologize. But I think of all the organizations that I've been part of, the common theme is we don't communicate well, or we don't communicate enough. And so I think it's a common theme. This is certainly my first time in public life as compared to commodity-based organizations in the farm community. And in some organizations, we tend to eat our own. And so I guess I'm looking at this and trying to say, I appreciate what you've said. I appreciate, and as we look forward, we've used town halls where in the commodity world where there's been call-ins on a specific topic. People can ask questions. It's an hour format, and what you have then is the ability to address a very specific and narrow topic that people want more information on. And so I think in today's environment, we have different tools in our toolbox, and to use them effectively. So I'm telling somebody the experts, but I'm very interested in what you have to present and look forward to how it will be implemented in Wilmot.
I'll just quickly comment on that. I think that's part of what we're going to be going through when we chat further with them and then come up collectively with our strategic plan. So, thank you very much. Councillor Martin, did you also have a question over there?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sellen. I appreciated, Andrea, your last comments about the consistency between council and staff. And thank you, CAO Chambers. I said your name correctly tonight. I messed up on her name last week. Couldn't think of it when I was talking. So you have encouraged us, CAO Chambers, to work on communication, and I've appreciated that. And I guess I'm curious, Andrea and Jacqueline, about the timing of the study, because the council members that you interviewed in August, none of them are at the table tonight. And with the change in council, is it does the timing matter on some of these studies? If you did a study 2 years into a term compared to at the end of one term, and now I'm not sure, it doesn't sound like there's going to be further study, it's more facilitated session and strategic planning. So I don't know, I guess I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the timing and whether that would affect any of the data that we've been looking at.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, I'm not sure that it will affect it in a really significant way. I think there's certainly, because some of the general themes were not necessarily related to whether it was the previous council or this current council. I think there's lots of themes and lots of things that we can draw from that in terms of the need for more information, where information is getting, where they're getting it from. You know, the concern that one of the top 3 is actually from other resources, like other social media, not from the township, so that's concerning for us. Not surprising, we have faced that in other municipalities as well, but you know, I think we got what we needed from those individuals and even from the survey. That I think that's enough for us, unless you have other thoughts. But I am very interested in hearing from all of you in terms of the things that you are also hearing, and if there is a sense from this. I mean, we take our direction from you. If there is a sense that you think that something has changed significantly, or that there is a need to kind of go back and look at that again, you know, obviously we are at your disposal to do as you would like us to.
Okay. Great. Councillor Wilkinson, sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. In general, I just want to commend you for the report. I enjoyed reading through it, and I think you guys really are in tune with what's going on. And I'm looking forward to participating in bringing some feedback to you directly as well. But particularly a couple highlights, you know, that stand out for me, that if I was going to comment and say, hey, we need to keep going on this, it's managing misinformation for sure, and trying to get people focused back on information coming from reputable sources. And then in addition to that, looking for ways to engage with the entire population and everyone. And I know that we're in a very unique community in the sense that we're sort of a mix of young and old, and we've got folks that are retired and living more rural versus urban. So it'd be interesting to see what you come up with, and that would be something I'd be curious, just some brief insight. You know, are we looking at potentially newsletters similar to what our MPs and MPPs put out monthly or quarterly? You know, how often would you implement, say, regular surveys, and how would you go about conducting those? Because there's again, realizing that divide. Is it paper-based? Is it phone-based? Is it internet-based? So I'd be curious to hear just some brief insight on that, but I think, you know, in general, I like where you're going.
Thank you. So through you on that, the public engagement piece, so certainly when we talk to different municipalities, and we've got, I think, 4 active projects right now, looking at either corporate communication strategies, or we also do reviews of municipal resources and things like that. So we've got 4 of those active, and we've done a whole bunch of them in the past. So whenever we do those comparable municipality things, I would say that municipal communicators are putting most investment in 2 areas. One is social media and digital communications, and the other one is public engagement. So in some cases, you know, where there is probably more budget and resourcing available, they will hire an actual public engagement lead, specialist, manager, to really be looking at that work and leading it. So there's no question that public engagement, to do it well, you know, takes time and effort, and it takes staffing, and really when you do it well in our, one of the key pieces is to be visible to the community in many ways as possible, as often as possible. And there are different unique approaches you can do that. So for example, I'm in Burlington, and one thing they did recently was they held a food for thought, they called it, and they basically opened up, I think it was at the library, and then they had tables on a number of different initiatives that were happening across the city. So it wasn't just one engagement on the budget, it wasn't just one engagement on the parks master plan. It was, you know, you could come and give feedback on 6 or 7 things all at once while getting some food. And they had some excellent engagement in that. Food always brings people, so that's a nice thing. But it was great and super efficient from the city's point of view, where they had staff kind of showing up, and they had that coordinated effort, and they were visible in the community. They were in a place where the community goes on a regular basis. So you're seeing sort of municipalities picking up on some of those things and trying to be in the places where people are, trying to find, and this is sort of that, building relationships with these community members. So when when you've got these agencies that are saying, hey, we want to be a part of this, let's leverage them and find out, well, let's have a conversation in terms of what does that look like for you? Where's our best way? Can we be on an agenda when you have a meeting coming up? Can you do those kinds of things? Is it worth, creating a little community roundtable that gets together twice a year that has some of these leaders in the community that come and give you feedback? There's so many different ways, but to your point, that piece is important, but it takes some focused effort for sure to really think about where are those opportunities and how can the leadership team or the different departments be also, coordinating with each other and sort of recognizing, there's an opportunity for, this project to sort of piggyback on another one and that kind of thing. So we want to be, encouraging you to move in those directions, and it's going to take time. This stuff doesn't happen within 6 months or a year. It's a bit of a slow process, but a deliberate one, and that's what we're hoping the strategy will help with, that deliberate piece and focused piece.
That's great. Any additional questions or comments, councillors? All right, well, seeing none, thank you very much, Andrea and Jacqueline, for joining us this evening, and we're looking forward to working with you on the communications plan as we continue.
Thank you so much. We look forward to it.
Thank you. I will now call the vote on this report, which is currently on the floor. Just for a quick reminder, it is that we receive Dana's report for information and that staff be directed to continue working with Red Brick Communications on the next steps to finalize the township's communication and engagement strategy. Does anybody have any further final comments or questions? All right, in that case, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to report 12.2, which is modifications to draft plan of subdivision 30T-19601 and 30T-19602, Wilmot Employment Lands, New Hamburg, DS-2023-04. Please refer to the agenda for the recommendation, as it is a few pages long. And if we can please get this onto the floor, if I can have a mover. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. I will now call on Andrew Martin, Manager of Planning and Economic Development, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salina. So this report is a continuation of our discussion from March 6th. Specifically at that point, the applicant for the Wilmot Employment Lands, specifically the Baden-View plan, proposed decrease in an easement that was originally proposed of 13.5 meters, proposing a reduction to 8 meters. And council requested staff to review that and provide more detail about whether that space would be sufficient for both maintenance and adequate buffering from the abutting residential uses. So the report before you provides that background. The applicant provided some updated cross sections showing different heights of buildings that potentially could be on that property, ranging from a 7.5 meter height to a 12 meter height. So the key piece to look at there in determining the setback is both the visual buffering piece as well as the zoning bylaw. So a standard industrial zone requires a building setback of the same as the building height, but no less than 7.5 meters. And also requires a buffer of 1.5 meters on top of that setback. So in the case of a 7.5 meter building, the minimum setback would be 9 meters. As the building gets taller, that setback increases. So the original concepts that provided recognize a building height of 12 meters, which ultimately requires a setback of 13.5 meters. So the building height plus 1.5 meters. So the recommendation before you doesn't change the concept that was presented originally. A 12-meter building would still, under the concept or under the recommendation proposed, still require a setback of 13.5 meters. However, the easement basically facilitates the long-term protection of tree planting and buffering on those abutting residential properties. The recommendation includes proposes a 9-meter easement as opposed to the 8 meters that was discussed at the previous meeting. And basically, staff would support that provides ample room for the offset planting of trees, as well as a small buffer area for long-term maintenance, similar to what you'd have if you were accessing the side yard or a rear yard of a home through its side yard. So that provides basically space to go in there for maintenance, mowing, trimming, and tree removal and replacement. So staff are certainly of the opinion that that the 9-meter easement provides that space, and ultimately the setback that would fall into the current zoning provides adequate setback for the building itself. So as the building gets taller, the setback would increase. There were a couple of, Council received kind of a written response from Mr. Hostetler just indicating some overall concerns. I had discussions prior to writing this report, and basically, Mr. Hostetler was certainly requesting that 13.5-meter setback remain in place. And then, basically staff were kind of explaining the difference between a setback and an easement, and ultimately, as we've discussed, we feel that there is adequate space. A couple other pieces of those comments relate to a formal report and comments provided in the original employment lands. The report that was referenced in those comments was actually for the new Hamburglers plan, which is the next industrial subdivision. There was a separate report that was prepared for the Bayview plan, for which Mr. Hostetler's and the other neighboring property owners' concerns were noted and commented on within that report. So just to clarify on that. And then the last piece that was discussed is just the noise study component. So there was a noise study completed, 2018. Ultimately, through this current request, there was a letter update prepared. So not a new study, but basically a letter clarifying that the requirement for a noise attenuation berm was related to potential incompatible rear yard uses. The zoning bylaw right now precludes those uses. So rear yard loading, parking, outdoor storage isn't permitted within the rear of the buildings. And ultimately, the SLR update to the Novus report basically identifies that the recommendations of the Novus report from 2018 basically only required the earthen berm if those rear yard uses were present. So essentially, given they're not present, the earthen berm isn't required, and that was what the update to that report was. The original report speaks to kind of impact radiuses from certain uses. So there was a radius of 20 meters that was discussed, indicating that certain uses aren't permitted within that based on provincial guidelines, and to a certain extent that's correct, but the purpose of creating or updating a noise study is to actually look at those uses within those contributing areas. So within 20 meters, what's being proposed. And ultimately there could potentially be concerns with outdoor storage, rear yard loading, those sorts of things within that 20-meter area. However, in this case, given those uses are required to be in front of the building, they would be outside of that 20-meter area. And then the last piece that just basically kind of strengthens that study is that the requirement for each subsequent building to have an updated noise study when they're built. So that updated noise study will ensure that the assumptions of that original report with respect to the building size, building location, height, location of mechanical units, those sorts of things that could contribute noise or issues to those neighboring residences are looked at further prior to site plan approval. So if, for instance, a building height of 7.5 meters, if a 9-meter setback isn't sufficient to require to mitigate those noise concerns, the building might need to be further from that property line if that's justified based on the noise study. So that report would be prepared, and similar to the original, would be reviewed either by the region or a third-party peer reviewer, as the case might be. And ultimately, that would then address to make sure that there's no mitigating issues with noise. So to conclude, basically, staff are supportive of the reduction to provide a 9-meter easement, as we feel the easement is there to protect maintenance and the existence of those trees, and the current provisions within the zoning bylaw certainly provide adequate setback between buildings and property lines, and again, with taller buildings, those setbacks are more significant, and certainly staff feel that that ensures compatibility between land uses. The last piece of the report just deals with a kind of a minor modification to the New Hamburglers plan, which is the plan closer to Nafziger Road. So the original report that Council considered on March 6th dealt with some phasing reduction removals from the Badenview plan, and the applicant has requested that that same approach apply to the New Hamburglers plan. So staff have just clarified the required modifications within their recommendation in this report as well. So ultimately dealing with the berm removal and then the phasing in both the Badenview and the Hamburglers plan is ultimately what the recommendation deals with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Does anybody have direct questions of Mr. Martin before we invite up Pierre Chauvin from MHBC? Oh, yes, Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I'm just clarifying in terms of the property line and the 9 meters. Can a building be built right on the property line? The back of the building, could it potentially be right on the property line?
Through Mayor Sullivan, so the zoning would require that the building be no closer than the required setback. So that would be the combination of the building height, not less than 7.5 meters, plus a 1.5 meter buffer. So the closest a building could, in theory, be built would be 9 meters from the rear property line. So basically the easement would be there, but the zoning bylaw would duplicate that for a building of 7.5 meters, and then that building location would be further based on the increased height of the building.
Great. And if I could then, oh, sorry, Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, since I was the one that kind of instigated some of this at the last meeting, and I think it was deferred to this meeting, I don't know if we need a motion to lift it from the table. It wasn't tabled, or three-quarter.
So it's already on the table,
Okay.
the recommendation. Staff have brought it back for us and made it easy.
Yeah,
so.
okay. So then the question that I have is, the height of is it a sliding scale? So as I understood your comments was, if the taller the building, then it starts sliding away from the property line, so it's a moving, and so that's still in place. And because it was reduced from 13.5 to 9, does that have any implications about having to change the sliding scale in the overall background in the planning, whatever tools you use to determine the setback, whatever. I'm searching for the correct words, but so that would, I guess I'm not looking to have my ignorance basically forcing you to change a whole bunch of rules and regulations. That's, I guess, would be my comment.
Through Mayor Solomon. Yes, so you're correct. The zoning really takes care of that setback, and it did before. Ultimately, the reason a 13.5 meter easement was proposed is based on the concept that was received and the proposal that was received. It was deemed that that was what they were looking at being the SEP, so we just basically reflected that through the easement requirements. So what we've modified in this report is basically applying the easement over the minimum setback. So the minimum a building could be is 9 meters. So providing an easement over 9 meters doesn't create any new implications for lot development. They can't build in that 9 meters anyway, so let's protect that whole area for the purpose of planting trees and long-term maintenance. But again, as the building gets taller, anything more than, anything greater than 7.5 meters, in theory, pushes that building slightly further away. So at 12 meters, that 13.5 meter setback that was originally looked at is still where that building of 12 meters would need to be built.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through you, Mayor. I appreciate that explanation, by the way, with regards to the easement. I would tend to agree with what you've suggested in terms of the site plan and sort of the controls over noise, because everything should be facing the front. You mentioned something interesting to me, was that potential modifications down the road or changes to a building could potentially bring some noise to the back, whether it be mechanical or storage, which we hope wouldn't happen. But does that leave the door open that potentially down the road there could be the chance to revisit, say, a sound barrier or a berm if something should change like that, or is that essentially taken care of in perpetuity?
Through Mayor Solomon. So the updated noise reports would look at what's required in terms of mitigation. So we don't expect anything different. It would just be to clarify that the building location is where it was anticipated to be built. What isn't known at that point, there was an assumption where mechanical units would be on the roof of the building. You know, if that were to change, then that would be looked at through that study. And then ultimately, the permanency of that secured through the site plan agreement. So that would provide some basis for going forward, that we know that what's built there, they're bound by the requirements of the site plan agreement. If they were to propose to change something further down the road, they would then have to, you know, take a look at that again. So ultimately, yeah, it's addressed through that future noise study and site plan to make sure. It doesn't change anything with respect to rear yard storage. That was probably a bad example on my part because the zoning precludes that. So if someone were to want to propose that, they would have to apply for a site-specific zoning amendment to change that, and which would become a public process, would require updated noise studies and that sort of thing. But ultimately, through those individual noise studies, if, you know, it was determined that, you know, for some unforeseen reason there was a need for a berm or a noise wall, that would be something that would be looked at that point. But again, it's not not anticipated, because the only real unknown is the exact location of the building and the mechanical units. The main significant issues are not permitted to occur in the back of the buildings.
Great, thank you very much. So I will now call on Pierre Chauvin from MHBC, planning to delegate on this report. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Chauvin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning. I don't want to take up more time this evening on this matter. I just want to thank Andrew for his excellent presentation, and I agree with everything he has said this evening, and we fully support the recommendation that's before you this evening. And I do thank Councillor Cressman for the deferral, and it's allowed us, I think he used the word collaborative, working in collaboration. I think we did have a collaborative session here and came to a consensus on an appropriate easement buffer, and I think that'll address all the concerns that you may have in the residents as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions, councillors? I do have one question, actually, and this was just coming directly from a constituent. He was wondering if the trees that you're planting could possibly be higher than 5 feet at the point of planting. I don't know if that's something that the group is open to considering, but I thought that I would ask as it came through your question to me. Thank
you, Madam Mayor. Fair question. I think it's something we'll have to consider based on the tree stocks that are available at the time when we do the landscaping. One of the intention is to have this easement is that the landscaping gets done as soon as possible in the construction process. And it could be very well be that these lots sit here vacant for some time while these trees grow. So I'm fully anticipating that will happen, but we certainly will look at the sizes of the tree stocks that we will source. And also that's a requirement that we do get it approved by, the landscape plans approved by the township. So I'm sure they'll hold our feet to the fire as well. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Any additional questions, councillors? All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mr. Chauvin. Seeing no more questions or comments, I will call the vote. So all of those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to item 12.3, which is the Public Works Operation Space Needs Analysis, IS-2023-06. The recommendation is that staff be directed to pursue recommendations outlined in the Public Works Operation Space Need Analysis Report to purchase land so as to significantly expand the size of the operations area to meet the 30 to 60 year growth horizon, and following land purchase, plan a phased construction of public works operation centers to meet space needs, adjacency, environmental, and growth requirements for modern municipal operations through release of a design RFP, and through the course of the design to include the phased approach to site development needs within the 10-year capital plan. So I will now turn it over to Jeff Mollenhuis, our Director of Infrastructure Services, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. This report presents the space need analysis, as you've noted, for the Public Works Operations Center. The report was initiated to consider general existing space needs and growth space needs as well. It looked at the 30 to 60 year growth window, looking at the performance and functionality of our site operations to date, and as noted, to accommodate our existing needs and our growing future needs as well. There are a number of key performance metrics and operational requirements the site currently cannot accommodate today. It is a smaller site existing today as about 8-acre site, and it will certainly have more of a need in the future once the boom of growth in the community comes. The key findings of the report are total land space needs of roughly 34 acres to accommodate that 60-year window, with a need of 40 to 50,000 square feet of building space, more or less. The existing land and facilities on site now are roughly a quarter to half of what that future need will be. The report includes a concept layout. You can see within the report that there's obviously a concept of land as well, but I did want to caution that it's just a concept only, and it's really for presentation purposes so that we can sort of see what we'll say a modernized layout would look like. The final facility design will very likely change based on the configuration of lands that are finally sited, and that will be in place to accommodate the outlined needs. As noted, the recommendations of the staff report are to begin the process of siting that land to meet the operational growth needs, to plan a phased construction, and to incorporate planning into the 10-year capital plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
So, looking at the consultant's plans and seeing the need being explained in the background material, do we walk away from the existing site as you see it? Would it be a totally new site, or is that yet to be determined? Like, is any of the features on the current site redeemable or reusable, or whatever the proper terminology would be?
Sure, yeah, through you, Mayor. There are a few buildings on site that could be continue to be used for a number of years. We do have one major structure that is approaching its end of life, and that's a storage structure for vehicles. We do have another material storage building that, again, has some challenges with it, and so we are, I would say, approaching the end of life of that structure as well. To answer your question about the existing site and whether or not we would walk away, I would say that it's in an ideal location. It really would depend on our ability to gain lands. And if that is the case where it's not a possibility in that location, then we would have to look for alternative sites.
Any additional questions, councillors? All right, thank you very much, Director Molyneux. So now if we can get this on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. So on to item 12.4, which is repeal Wilmot Fireworks Bylaw 2012-01 and replace with Bylaw 2023-XX COR-2023-15. The recommendation is that Council repeals Fireworks Bylaw 2012-01 and replace it with Fireworks Bylaw 2023-XX. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I will now call on Aaron Merritt, our Manager of Municipal Law Enforcement, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. This report outlines two minor additions to the fireworks bylaw. The first addition is to allow the use of fireworks to celebrate the holiday of Diwali. This change kind of came about through one family's request to allow permission for a small backyard fireworks display during their family's celebration of Diwali. This was over the last couple years. We've always allowed permission for this to happen. I just think it's a really good time to update the bylaw to reflect our community better. The second change or update is to the list of prohibited fireworks under the bylaw. Most of the fireworks are regulated and prohibited by the federal government. I just thought it's time that the township's fireworks bylaw states that. I just also wanted to let you know, I had my friends at the fire department look it over. They are in support of these changes as well. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I first of all want to commend you for coming forth with this report. I think anything that we can do to promote diversity in our community is a very good thing. I secondly want to say that I do enjoy fireworks, and I've enjoyed attending the fireworks over the years. Was at Canada Day last year. I'm just curious, do you know about the carbon footprint? What is the potential problem to our environment with fireworks? Is that something that we should consider as we also change the bylaw, or consider changing the bylaw? I mean, we haven't changed it, but I don't know. I'm just curious if anybody has information on that in terms of the environmental impact.
I love how you ask it as such a simple question, but I feel that's a very in-depth answer. But Aaron, I don't know if you've done any research into it. If not, maybe that's something we can direct staff to look at.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I realize I did not give you any advance warning of this question, so I apologize for that. Like maybe, you know, I guess if I put my thoughts out in the public, it would be, I'd certainly be open to changing the bylaw, but maybe thinking over time, over the next number of years, environmentally, what we should be doing. I don't know. I'm just...
Yeah, most certainly. Aaron?
Thank you. Through the mayor, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I have no answer at all. This report was looked at just making some minor additions, and you know, maybe in the next couple of years do a full a revamp of the bylaw, and at that time I would have to seek outside help for any sort of environmental thing or protections or anything like that, but would be more than open to that.
That's great. Perhaps I could just put in the ear of staff when you're speaking with the other municipalities that we're looking to get an environmental person in, perhaps looking at something in that scope, because I know it obviously doesn't just pertain to the township. If staff is amenable just to take that recommendation, that's wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Stu.
I would just like to point for the record, I was not the family asking for the bylaw change. No, just to echo what Councillor Martin was saying, this is very welcomed. Being here for 15 plus years, I would never have thought this in my wildest dreams. It was us and maybe not even a handful, a couple families, and there are more than a handful now, and I've talked with a few of them, and truthfully they were kind of caught off guard and saying, wow, thank you, and they didn't see this coming, and so I want to commend you for that and just taking another step to making Wilmot a more welcoming community.
Now, I did have a question, but I also kind of need to pose it to council. I know that Lunar New Year, we have not had requests, but I do know that fireworks traditionally is a large part of the celebration. As we are already opening up the bylaw to make amendments, if the rest of council would also see fit adding in Lunar New Year as a celebration that we could allow fireworks, and that, of course, works with staff. Somebody else would need to table that is my only thing, but I don't know, Aaron, if you wanted to speak at all to if you guys have considered Lunar New Year. Again, I know that we haven't had requests for it, but...
Thank you. In looking at different holidays and different celebrations that use fireworks to help with celebration, Lunar New Year was looked at. I know the City of Waterloo allows for it, or allows for fireworks to be used for Lunar New Year. Very few other municipalities do not allow for it. That's not one of their amendments in their bylaw. And because I hadn't had a request, that's why I didn't add it to this bylaw. But if it's the wishes of council, it can be added, and we would support that in any way we could.
Great. Did Councillor Sidhu?
I would be in favor of adding it just as a proactive, and before we get a request, just to if there is someone sitting at home thinking about it, then maybe plants a seed in their head for it. So I would raise a motion to add the,
Great, so it would be an amendment, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Martin. So we'll vote on the amendment first. So all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Any final questions of Aaron on this bylaw before we do the final vote? Okay, thank you very much, Aaron. And all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. All right, so on to item 12.5, which is the petition for drainage works by owners of 1089 Huron Street regarding North Part Lot 27, concession south of Bleams Road, COR-2023-26. The recommendation is that report COR 2023-26 regarding a petition for drainage works by owners of 1089 Huron Street regarding North Part Lot 27, concession road on Bleams Road be received, and further, that Council of the Township of Wilmot hereby accept the petition for new drainage works on the north part of Lot 27, concession south of Bleams Road in the Township of Wilmot. To get that on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu, and I will now call on Jeff Bum, our Manager of Legislative Services and Clerk, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On February 27th, 2023, the Township of Wilmot received a petition for drainage work from the owner of Part Lot 27, concession south of Bleams Road, as identified in Attachment 1 of the report. This report provides Council with a copy of the petition, a key map as Attachment 2 to the report, and provides a detailed explanation of the steps that will occur if Council chooses to either accept or reject the petition. I will note that staff are requesting that the resolution be amended slightly from what's printed in the agenda, and I believe the Mayor has read it correctly with the change. In accordance with the Drainage Act, the engineer cannot be appointed tonight at this meeting. There is a 30-day waiting period before Council can appoint an engineer, so at the appropriate time I will bring forward a report for Council's consideration to make that appointment. Finally, I'll note that in attendance this evening is our Drainage Superintendent, so we're both available if there are questions from Council. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions at this time? Councillor Cressman.
So I guess this is for the drainage supervisor. Have you been out to the site to ascertain what the difficulty is that they're asking? I was intrigued by it and was trying to understand what the actual request was other than getting rid of water, but
okay, thank you. So my name is John Quincy. I'm the drainage superintendent for the township. I do the work on contract, so that's why you don't see me in the office every day. And with COVID, I was hardly here at all, but hopefully now that that's over, I'll come back more often. Yes, I have been to the site. I've attended quite a number of meetings. The key thing with respect to that property, if you're familiar with it, it's proposed to be redeveloped. And it's that change in development that's going to require them to have a storm drainage outlet. So I was involved right from day one with the initial meetings with the developer. They were initially looking at going west and south through what would have been called the Bass Drain or the Bass Drain. And they weren't too concerned at that time about the east part of the property, which is in the watershed of the Smith Drain. But they now plan, the last meeting I had with them, they now plan to develop the entire property. The demand apparently is there for development. And they determined through discussion with myself to try and create one outlet would be much easier for them. And the outlet through the Smith Drain only involves one road crossing, is a much shorter path to the major watercourse. So when they came back with that proposal at a meeting that I attended, I supported them. I modified the petition form for them so that they could make sure that the direction was understood once this petition was provided where this was going to go. The petition will have nothing to do with the development on the property. That drainage, all of the internal drainage will still be dealt with by the planning process in your engineering department and stuff like that. This is just going to make sure that the flow that comes from that property in the future will not impact on that downstream agricultural land. It's something we've been working for years to make sure that stormwater management and urban drainage is taken to a proper outlet and not simply allowed to discharge where it always has discharged in the past. So I think it should be a relatively straightforward report. We'll resolve a number of issues out there, and the Drainage Act process can more than handle any of the issues that may arise amongst the landowners. Key player will be MTO, a variety of people like that. So.
Thank you very much, John. Any additional questions, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I will now call the vote. All those in favor? And that also passes unanimously. On to item 12.6, which is the special events process and subsidies. The recommendation is that staff be directed to grandfather facility-used subsidies and in-kind staff costs for historical special events taking place at the township facilities for 2023, as outlined in the report CS 2023-02. And if we can get a mover, please, just to get this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Stu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I'll now call on Director Sandy Jackson from Community Services to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. The Township has a strong history of supporting special events, and staff acknowledge and understand the importance of these events for enhancing residents' sense of community, providing social engagement opportunities, and just plain fun. Special events are not only provide an enjoyable opportunity to interact with friends, neighbors, and visitors from our community, but they often generate opportunities for event organizing groups to fundraise. And none of these events would be possible without the hard work of many volunteers within our community. Some of the events that are outlined in the report include Easter egg hunts, Victoria Day and Canada Day events, a Mannheim Garage Sale, Mennonite Relief Sale, Mopar Fest, the Fall Fair, and the Santa Claus Parade. As staff do not have delegated authority to waive facility and staffing costs included in the fees and charges bylaw, the purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to continue supporting these events by grandfathering the level of support, the same level of support in 2023 that they had in 2022. As identified, there were there were 10 historical events supported in 2022 with free, discounted, or in-kind staff services that totaled just over $26,000 for the course of those events. 2023, it's anticipated that there will be similar costs between $25,000 and $30,000 to offer the same level of support. At the completion of the 2023 special event season, staff will summarize the discounts and free township resources that were provided and come back to council and present that information back to you. And with respect to waiving fees and charges, it's not something we do often, but it is a process that's important in order to give staff the authority to be able to continue to support these events. If council prefers an alternate method of looking at these events, consideration could be given in the 2024 budget for shifting these discounts to the municipal grants program or to the council special event budget, which has been used in the past. That's all summary I've got for this report. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Ms. Okrafka, Manager of Community Services, is here as well to help if there's any questions she can help with. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that update and for bringing forward this report. It's nice to actually see fulsomely what we give in kind back to the community and the impact that also has on the budget. I will open it up to council if they have questions. Councillor Sadhu.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Director Jackson. What would be the rough cost if we were to fully subsidize the rental for the events listed?
Through the mayor, sorry, the rental for all of the events?
Yeah, if we were to subsidize 100% for the rental costs.
Sure, thank you. So there are a number of the events that are already 100% subsidized. The ones that are not would be Just got to get the right chart, one moment. That one's in an email. Okay, so
Just while you're looking
There it
that
is.
up, Director Jackson, I will just make a note. My copy that I was reading missed the second part of the recommendation that we have on the floor, so I just wanted to verbally put that out there. It is the printed part, but it says that staff provide an update to council prior to the 2024 special event season with detailed subsidy and in-kind staff costs related to the 2023 events. So just so everybody knows what is fully on the floor, and whenever you're ready, Director Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor Solomon. Currently, as I indicated, a number of the events are 100% subsidized with respect to the facility rental only, not the additional staffing hours that are put in for those events. So to cover the full cost of the facility rentals for the events that are listed in here would be about an additional $6,000. Is that correct, Manny?
Sorry, through you, Mayor Salvin, and it would be approximately $11,772.11.
There you go. Sorry, one column.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Stu?
Yeah, so seeing as these events are a point of pride for our township with Canada Day, Mopar, Fall Fair, they bring in a lot of positive feedback to the community and essentially grow Wilmot as a whole. So I would be of the opinion if we take on the full subsidy for these events and help these organizations grow more. So I would like to raise a motion that moving forward that we would essentially eat that $11,700 and fully subsidize the facility rentals for these events.
Okay, sorry, I was just confirming procedurally what we need to do. So because that is out of the scope of what we currently have on the floor, we would need to first deal with what's on the floor, and then we can go back and raise that to vote on. So does anybody have questions pertaining to what is currently on the floor before we go to Councillor Studies? Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. When we're referencing the amount that is subsidized, and we talk about the facility rental cost, are we basically including everything? Are you saying that this is the cost that it would have been to rent it, or is this the cost, say, just to run it for the time? I'm just curious what the actual net cost is versus just the fact that we're maybe giving up the revenue from actual rental purposes.
Through the Mayor, the actual cost would be what's outlined on the detailed chart in the appendix. All this is representing, this $11,000, is just the rental fee for the facility. There are some fairly significant staffing costs for some of the other events. So those would also be costs that would still require council to approve us to waive those fees, because normally we would charge back additional staffing costs over our base minimum that we would normally carry for an event. So it would be beyond the $11,700 to cover all costs related that impact the. So we would still be coming back with a report next year to cover subsidizing the staff costs.
If I may, I'm going to rephrase that. I guess my question is, like, if we pick one, for example, the New Hamburg Santa Claus Parade, there's a full rental or full facility rental cost of $216.35 that we're 100% subsidizing. That number, where is that generated from? Is that the overhead in terms of like the heat hydro that's associated with subsidizing it, or is that just we could have charged this but we're not, so here you go?
Through the Mayor, that is the fee that it would cost to rent the park with the track and where they line up the floats for the parade. So that's part of, in the fees and charges bylaw, and all of these amounts are derived from the fees and charges bylaw. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer out there that sometimes these events change each year, and if they are looking for more time or more space, these costs would be different. So they could increase, they could decrease, depending on how the event operates each year, year to year.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, I would speak in favor of the current motion as it stands. I'm a strong believer of vested interest in putting some money on the table for organizations. They're getting a break on fees, and I think the importance of them having some costs associated with it, just like my kids had in their education, is very important to remind. And I think we have the ability to evaluate it ahead of next year. And so I would speak strongly in support of it as it stands.
Any additional questions or comments on what's on the floor right now, councillors? And I'm actually going to quickly turn it over to Jeff Bunn just to get some clarity.
Through you, Mayor, I'm just curious, Councillor Sadhu, for what you were proposing as a potential amendment, can you clarify what you were asking for? I'm just wondering, we might be able to do an amendment to this motion, but I just want to understand the scope.
Yeah, essentially my amendment would be the, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, the 3 events that are not fully subsidized for the rental cost, that we would 100% subsidize those.
Okay, so through you, Mayor, you can do that as an amendment to this motion.
That's what I would like to do.
Okay, so we need to deal with the amendment first. So that has been put forward by Councillor Sadhu. Anybody willing to second that? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. I am going to open it up for discussion because I also have some comments too. But before I get to my comments, any other councillors have comments? Okay. I would also err on the side of what Councillor Cressman was saying, especially looking at this year when we came out of budget committee, looking at where we can cut things, and now this directly impacts parks and facilities, their income source, if we're taking away regular annual events that we have. Not to say that I don't want to look at adjusting how we do fees with our community groups, but I think that needs to be a larger conversation opposed to just picking out 3 events that just happen to be before us because they traditionally get subsidies that council has to actually approve versus, I know there are a lot of other community organizations that would never cross our table because they just do the regular user fees and go through the regular bookings. So I think it's kind of missing that scope a little bit, which we need to be cognizant of. Next year, I'd be looking into the 2024 budget. I would really like to work on engagement in general with all the community groups, but I think for this year, personally, I would prefer to see it stay. I know certainly those groups budget knowing what the fees are and what subsidies they do get from the municipality. So although it will be a nice windfall for them, I don't know if fiscally I can also justify that when we cut other items out of our budget, some that were even less than $11,000 because we couldn't increase our budget. So I feel that's kind of putting us a little counterintuitive to what we've done over, but those would be my comments on it. Does anybody else have any other comments before we vote on the amendment? Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, thank you. In reference to this, what we're talking about here is including the additional $11,772.11 in terms of subsidy. When I look at what we are 100% subsidizing versus what we're not 100% subsidizing, I think that the 3 things should be mentioned so that people are aware of what we're talking about. We're talking about the Mennonite Relief Sale, Mopar Fest, and the New Hamburg Fall Fair, all of which I would argue are probably the 3 larger events that we bring to this township. So I see this as, yes, it is a 0.1% that we are in essence giving back, given the discussion that we just had. But I think the net benefit to the community here is that these groups will benefit, have a little bit more flexibility in what they're able to put on, but additionally, these events bring in tourist dollars. They bring in a lot of individuals to the community that spend money, that are brought to the downtown core. So that would be my case for looking at this and saying, in truth, yes, we're giving up a tiny bit of revenue there. But again, I look at the net cost in total of what we've actually given up. I see this as a huge net benefit and an opportunity for these organizations to prosper by doing this.
That's great. Seeing no more comments or questions, we will call the vote on the amendment. So all of those in favor? Okay, and all those opposed? And that carries. And now we will vote on the, sorry, I didn't know if you were signaling to speak before we voted. CAO Chambers.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I think those are fair points, and if you're looking at supporting community events from a community development or economic development lens, that, going forward, we would look at perhaps a more appropriate area within the budget to fund those so that we aren't impacting the community services group who, we've had many discussions through the budget about being resource strapped. So certainly in other communities that I've been in, I've seen special events and those types of things supported for the benefit that they bring to the community, but typically the revenue is still allocated to the Recreation and Facilities Department, and they would be, those expenses would be through a budget that perhaps council had to support community events. And that's something we have been discussing as a group and can bring forward that in next year's report as well.
That's great. All right, now moving on to the regular recommendation as now amended. All those in favor? And all those opposed? All right, and that passes. Okay, moving on to 12.7. The recommendation is that report CS 2023-02, ICE facilities outside of the Township of Wilmot, be received for information purposes. To get this on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will now call on Sandy Jackson, Director of Community Services, again to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So this report provides a high-level review of the feasibility of entering into an agreement with the Township of Wellesley as an interim solution to ice time shortages in Wilmot, as requested by the Finance and Budget Committee. And it provides information at a high level as well as a summary of potential ice available in surrounding communities. There are several factors impacting the feasibility of entering into a lease with the Township of Wellesley for use of their existing rink, which are outlined in more detail in the report. A major consideration is that the facility is at end of life, hence the construction of the new facility in Wellesley. And based on discussions and information from Wellesley staff, the existing facility will require significant investment to bring the building to a condition that it can be used for several years. More specifically, mechanical issues have been identified that must be repaired prior to reopening the building for use in September. In addition, the facility may still be required by Wellesley if their new facility is not ready and construction is not yet complete for the fall of 2023. While staff have not prepared a detailed operation plan based on current challenges with staffing, it is anticipated that there could be further challenges for Wilmot to attract and retain staff for this operation. Based on information provided by the Township of Wellesley, staff have developed a high-level estimate of operating costs, which would be in the range of approximately at least $250,000 to $300,000 per year. This would equate to approximately 2.5% to 3% increase on the tax base levy. This estimate does not include any major maintenance that would be required to make the facility operational and is dependent upon renting approximately 50 hours of ice per week. As outlined in the report, it's anticipated that over the next few years, up to $3 million for mechanical repairs could be required to continue using this facility. The high-level revenue estimates, operating costs, and capital costs are outlined in the appendix to the report. In an effort to determine if ice time was available in surrounding area arenas outside of Wellesley, staff reached out to a number of municipalities and provided some non-prime time options within the staff report. Although township teams are currently using some prime time ice in other municipalities, additional ice during prime times is difficult to find in surrounding facilities. There's no simple solution to these challenges. However, staff is not recommending pursuing use of the Wellesley Arena for the reasons identified in this report. Staff will continue to communicate with area municipalities to find available ice and share any information that we obtain with our user groups where possible. And we're happy to answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Jackson. Council, do we have any questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through you, Mayor. No question. I do thank you for the time and effort that you put into this and preparing it. I think there's obviously a lot of valuable information that we're able to gather from it. But what was interesting is looking at the exercise that we've gone through here. Yes, we've identified that there are significant challenges into running a facility outside of our township, which I think we all had anticipated. But I'm wondering if we could take and I'd like to put forward a motion or an amending motion to say, I don't even know if it's an amending motion technically because we're voting on information here, but what I'd like to pursue is that give direction to staff to look at the same level of detail, but potentially maybe even a little bit more in depth, to look at specifically what the New Hamburg Community Center requires in order to become operational again, taking into account what agreements we have in place for that building and future needs, but as well what it would be to just get it back up and running to be either a practice facility or potentially a full use again. So that is something that I would like to table coming out of this.
Staff, how would you like that dealt with? Would you like it as an actual motion or?
Yes, that would need to come back.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay. So it would need to be a formal motion, separate from what we currently have tabled. So after we can deal with that. Does anybody have any other questions or comments on the Wellesley report that was brought forward? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I want to thank you, Director Jackson, and your staff for this hard work. I really appreciate you putting the work into it. It looks like it's a possibility, but it's hard for me to think that it would be feasible for us to support it, given the potential costs that would be there in terms of what we would need to do to keep that facility running. Plus, we don't even know if it would be available in September if the new construction is finished or not finished. But I really appreciate you putting the work into this. It's very informative.
That's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkins.
Through you, Mayor, just as a sort of general commentary, I want to acknowledge who we have in attendance this evening, but also, you know, it's not lost on this council that there are requests and desires coming from the ICE user groups. So we're certainly sympathetic to the challenges that they face, as well as the difficulties in balancing schedules. I know with young children myself, it's quite difficult to do this from day to day. So I certainly sympathize with the groups and understand what their ask is and what their needs are. I assure you we're looking and trying to uncover all avenues here to address those concerns while also balancing the needs of everyone in this township. And I think that's the key point, is that when we look at everyone in this township, specifically speaking on behalf of my ward, we have to be conscious of who lives here in the total demographic sense. So I want to thank everybody that's involved in giving feedback and also know that we are taking this into account as we approach each and every decision. So again, thank you to everyone who's contributed, and thank you to Director Jackson for putting this report together.
Councillor Stu.
Through the Mayor to Director Jackson, just brainstorming some ideas and kind of out-of-the-box thinking. Do we know if there was any primetime ice being eaten up by people, quote-unquote, outside of the township?
Through the Mayor, that is a little bit of a complicated question, because some of the people who sign the actual rental contracts do not necessarily live presently in Wilmot Township. Maybe they used to live in Wilmot Township and they moved, but a number of the people who are on the ice with them are local. So it is a little bit tricky to answer that question. We did do a real deep dive today to take a look at the schedule. There are about 13 and a half hours that are used by adults. And I think 3 or 4 of those were actually signed by someone who doesn't live in the township. Having said that, we have many users who don't live in the township at all levels within the various organizations, and that's part of the attraction of that beautiful facility that we have. People like to come here to play their sports and use the pool and the arenas. So it is It is a possibility that some of the adult groups could be moved to accommodate more youth. Those are historical rentals that have been here for a long time for some of those local residents, so it would be challenging.
Okay. Any additional, Councillor Stu?
Just a comment on to what Councillor Wilkinson was saying. I see the Wellesley report, and to add a 2 to 3% minimum base levy to improve an arena that's outside of our township, I don't see how that would make sense for our residents and our tax base. Additionally, if we are going to spend $3, $4, $5 million, I would like to explore the old arena and see if that is feasible for that amount of money.
Great, so we will deal with accepting this report for information, and then we will go back to the motion that was proposed. So any final questions or comments before we vote? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of receiving this for information purposes? And that passes unanimously. And then we will open up the motion, correct? Okay. Perfect. So if you could just reiterate the motion that you did want to bring forward, Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. What I'd like to propose is that we direct staff to undertake a similar study with maybe expanded scope to look at what it would take to get ice back into the New Hamburg Community Center. I think, without engaging a third-party service, if we can try and come up with some sort of an exhaustive list of the items that would need to be addressed immediately, and then some of the items that would additionally need to be addressed potentially down the road as well, would be ideal.
Just because I can't add things, would you be open to the consideration, and I propose it, because we are looking for different solutions, one for, I know, cost, looking through the reports that we were provided previously on that facility. Could we possibly ask staff to look into ice surfaces such as, I might be pronouncing this wrong, but glice? It's a lot of professional hockey players use it. It's not actually an ice surface, but it is ice-like. But it can be used year-round. Maintenance is way less. It's not a plastic, but it's almost like that kind of sensation, but you use your regular skates on it. Again, they're used on like training machines a lot for professional players. So I don't know what the costing of that would be, but it may be less than trying to get a full refrigeration facility in. So you'd be open to adding that to your amendment, or your motion, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I would. I think that's a very interesting thought and not something I was aware of.
Great. So do we have a seconder for this motion? Yep. Oh, sorry, we have a comment.
I just have a question, and I believe there has been sort of a high-level analysis in the past of that, and we could bring that report back for council's information. Certainly we'd be looking at perhaps a timeline for having this report back. We are about to pass our budget tonight, so looking at anything would be into subsequent budget years. So does council have an estimated timeline in which you'd like to have this reporting back?
So through you, Mayor, I think ideally we'd like to have the reporting back. Again, just looking at the similar study that was conducted, I think that can be put together relatively quickly. By no means are we committing to, say, spending funds on this particular project, but it'd be better for us to have that full scope of information, because I can comment on reading the previous report. I think a lot of those numbers and those details were missing. So we would like to see a greater level of detail into what the cost estimates would be in order to potentially achieve the outcome of putting ice back in. Is that going to happen this year? Not likely, but down the road. Sure. We'd like to see this report brought back to council, we'll say within 3 months.
Thank you. And then just one other aspect that I think we would have to investigate, because we do have an existing funding program for the renovations to that facility that do not include that scope of work. We would have to look and investigate the impact on that funding allocation to see if it would be impacted.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I guess my question would be this artificial ice or whatever you're talking, this glass or whatever it is. What is the implications for other uses of that? We're thinking of TCP, we're thinking of the Mennonite Relief Sale, we're thinking of the Fall Fair. Are they going to be slip sliding around in terms of using that facility, or can you remove it?
So I will be honest, I am by no means an expert in it. My understanding is it can both be removed, almost like, as to say, puzzle pieces going in place, but large scale. But also there are some organizations that have it that put over top like a false flooring essentially. Again, that would be something perhaps staff can bring back more answers, and it may not be feasible, but I just think we should be looking at different possibilities and opportunities. So, great. Any additional questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Stu.
I would just second that motion from Councillor Wilkinson.
Perfect. That's what I was just asking, if we had a seconder yet. All right. Thank you. So that is on the floor now. I see no other questions or comments.
Through you, Mayor, can we just get a recap of how it reads, please?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Wilkinson, that staff be directed to bring a report back to Council within 3 months outlining costs associated with using the New Hamburg Community Centre as an ice pad, including using glice.
And bring back in 3 months' time? Yep. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I appreciate the innovative thinking that Councillor Wilkinson and my other councillor colleagues are thinking by considering the old building, and considering that I live in an old house. I'm very happy to make use of old buildings. I thought that the study that we read had information on it regarding the New Hamburg Community Centre and the costs associated with it. And so I'm trying to understand what would be different. I understand, Councillor Wilkinson, that you're saying the numbers weren't there, and I don't have the report in front of me to say what numbers were there, but there must be a level of detail that you're looking for, that because I thought it, according to what I'm remembering, we would need to change the work on the zoning, that there's a floodplain, we'd need to work on the dressing rooms because we would need to increase the size. We would need to do some work in terms of the seating, that it doesn't fit the zoning in terms of current standards. So it seems to me that there's a lot of work, and I'm thinking if we're starting to talk in the millions of dollars, and yet we had the plan that would be to have a new facility at the Wilmot Rec Centre where we already have 2 ice pads, I worry that it's putting money where it may not be useful. But as I say, I mean, you know, theoretically, if we can continue to use an old building and not tear it down, that's a great concept. I don't know. So I realize we're in a discussion here. I'm not sure that I want to vote against you, but I'm also not sure that I can vote in favor of you, so I'm in a bit of a quandary.
One quick thing I want to note, we're not tearing down the building, so anyone from TCP watching, we're not tearing down the facility. But I do certainly get what you're saying. I do know, Sandy, we were speaking earlier today about possibly just updating the numbers to current day standards. But
Through the Mayor, there is a fair bit of detail. I didn't have a chance today to pull out that report to review it, but there's a fair bit of detail in there. I think we would just be updating those costs. There are a number of other concerns with respect to lack of parking, that outside of the synthetic ice, which I have heard of, by the way. I'm not sure it would be useful for all applications, and that would be something we would want to consult with the user groups as well with, but there are no dressing rooms there. There is a significant amount of work that would have to be done to turn it to ice. There is no refrigeration system there anymore. It's completely archived, and the floor needs to be jackhammered and replaced to put an actual ice system in. So it will be many more millions in my estimation, but we can definitely bring that back to council and update what was in the Monteith Brown report.
And Councillor Wilkinson, did you also want to speak on? No? Okay. Any additional questions or comments then? All right. So all of those in favor then? All those opposed? All right, and that carries. Now on to our final report, I believe, for the evening, which is 12.8, and that is the municipal budget package. So a recommendation is that the 2023 municipal budget, as recommended by the Finance and Budget Committee, be approved as presented, and further, that the Director of Corporate Services and Treasurer be authorized to prepare the necessary levying bylaw to raise $10,643,850 for the township purposes from general taxation. To get this on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman, and I will now call on Patrick Kelly, our Director of Corporate Services and Treasurer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen and members of Council. On behalf of the team in Corporate Services, peers on the corporate leadership team, and the entire Finance and Budget Committee, I'm pleased to be here tonight to present an overview of the 2023 municipal budget being brought forward tonight for your formal approval. Next slide, please. Beginning in early December 2022, staff presented a projected inflationary adjustment to our base levy of 4.8%, which was based upon core CPI data. Throughout subsequent meetings and deliberations, that base levy was reduced to 3.24%, which is approximately 1.56% below that inflationary target. Coupled with assessment growth of 0.38%, the dedicated infrastructure levy, and an additional 0.84% for additional staffing, the net levy adjustment presented for 2023, as endorsed by the Finance and Budget Committee, is 6.88%. The breakdown is shown on that slide in front of you. Next slide, please. This graphic shows the historical base levy adjustments as per Township's previous practice. These adjustments have historically been tied to inflation or below inflation. The 2023 adjustment of 3.24% is projected to add $322,000 in additional funding, which represents approximately $35.54 to the average residential property owner. Next slide, Jen. Assessment growth, as depicted on this slide, was at its lowest level in the past 10 years, and the lowest level even beyond that time frame. At just 0.38%, assessment growth generates $37,700 in additional funding to the general levy in 2023. Staff, as you've heard through previous reports, are hopeful to see additional growth as new developments continue to come on stream. The combined levy adjustment, as mentioned, at 6.88%, generates $722,680 in additional funding, including that assessment growth previously mentioned. This is slightly below the increase that was approved in 2022, which generated $111,000 more in additional levy funding. The graphic here outlines historical levy increases from the past 10 years. Moving on to the capital program, the Budget Committee endorsed a capital program valued at $22.5 million with a number of additional projects being carried forward from 2022. We're looking at another busy year for infrastructure projects in Wilmot Township. Some key projects have been listed on this slide, but the full listing is included within the final budget package. I will note there was one error. The admin parking lot, which was deferred by committee, was included in that package. It's not included in the final numbers, just one page that will be omitted in the final package when it's published. With the new term of council, we will be undertaking a comprehensive update of our corporate strategic plan, which will lay the framework for the next 4 years. One key priority this year will be the establishment of an economic development strategy. And as noted, with the importance of growth, that growth will be supported through a number of critical infrastructure investments, including but not limited to the Baden Trunk Sanitary Sewer EA and design. The multi-year reconstruction of Snyder's Road will enter its third phase in 2023. This project is led by the Region of Waterloo, but the Township is responsible for underground infrastructure. Finally, a number of projects will continue our township efforts to improve recreation amenities throughout all communities, including notably the construction of the Nith River Promenade in downtown New Hamburg. Council can prepare to start seeing tender and RFP awards coming forward in the next few meetings as we prepare for another busy construction season. This next graphic depicts the proportional funding that supports our capital program in 2023. A large component of funding continues to come from senior government sources, which stresses the importance of open dialogue with our counterparts at the provincial and federal level to ensure stable and predictable funding from the Canada Community Building Fund and the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. The blue shaded area indicates our current tax levy dollars being contributed to capital, which are just over $1 million. The majority of remaining funding is derived from development charges and infrastructure reserve funds. The gray shaded area represents levy-funded debt financing requirements for the 2023 program, which is currently estimated at $3.38 million. Following endorsement of the 2023 program, the Finance and Budget Committee reviewed and endorsed an updated 10-year capital forecast. This capital forecast is a living document which follows guidance from a number of studies and plans and currently sits at a total value of approximately $156 million over the 10-year horizon. As our asset management practice continues to mature, this forecast will continue to become a foundation for long-term infrastructure planning with a stronger support from asset management perspective of evidence-based decision-making. Other key inputs into our long-term financial plan have been noted on this slide. I'll just make reference to the strategic plan and the roads needs study, which are two key components of our long-term planning process set to be updated within the current calendar year. Finally, with regard to capital, this graphic shows funding sources that will support capital over the 10-year horizon. Our key target within the forecast is at the base of each column. The space represents the levy-funded portion of capital spending, where staff target an inflationary increase over the life of the forecast. 2023 levy funding totals, as I said previously, just over $1 million and increases gradually to over $1.7 million at the tail end of the 10-year. To ensure this is sustainable, staff utilize development charges, grant funding programs, and where necessary, deploy infrastructure reserve funds and debt financing to meet our critical needs. As discussed in previous committee meetings, the reliance upon development charges and infrastructure reserves will present cash flow challenges in the near term due to the number of large-scale underground infrastructure needs. Staff are continuing to work with external consultants in developing a debt management and reserve fund strategy, which will ensure the long-term operational needs of the community are not held back by future debt servicing costs. Municipalities across Ontario were challenged this budget cycle to strike a balance between inflationary pressures and the impact of tax increases on the community. Staff are grateful for the level of engagement from this council in working collaboratively to achieve a balanced budget that meets the growing service level expectations of the Wilmot community. Overall expenditures for 2023 are projected at $25.4 million, inclusive of a $1.7 million transfer to critical infrastructure reserve funds. On top of inflationary pressures, the township once again experienced clawbacks from provincial funding programs, including both the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund and the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. This budget includes a number of service level enhancements across all service areas, alongside a number of minor capital improvements, which are outlined in greater detail within the budget package. Wilmot Township continues our commitment to growing a culture with health and safety at our core, and the operating budget does include expanded investments for health and safety training and personal protective equipment. Operating revenues are anticipated to rebound with the return of in-person activities, and overall community services revenues are projected to increase by $650,000 over our 2022 budgets. While staff continue to advocate on behalf of all 4 rural municipalities in the region on the province's Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund group, the annual reduction of 15% in Wilmot is anticipated to continue for the next several years. This underscores the importance of our dedicated infrastructure levy and its importance in meeting asset management objectives. Under the consolidated budget presentation, the majority of operating revenues and expenditures come from infrastructure services, which does include our water and sanitary utility. Community services is the next largest operating area with $5.4 million in expenditures and just over $2 million in operating revenues. The remainder of expenditures from an operating perspective are distributed across corporate services, fire services, development services, and the office of the CAO. Next slide. As noted, the water and sanitary budget is incorporated with infrastructure services, but we provided a separate slide outlining the utility budget, which totals $6.8 million with a net transfer to reserves of approximately $900,000. Service charges increased to $119 annually for water and $122 for sanitary, which is roughly, when combined, $20 per month to recover funding towards future infrastructure in accordance with the Township's asset management plan. The average bi-monthly bill, based on 31 cubic meters, will increase by $8.81 or 4.59%. Next slide. At the initial meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee in December, committee endorsed our 2023 Municipal Grants Program. We continue to support our valuable community groups and voluntary organizations as they adapt to the post-COVID-19 environment, with funding allocations totaling over $70,000. These payments will be distributed at our next council meeting, and on behalf of staff and council, we can say we're grateful for the efforts of our community volunteers. Final slide. So to summarize, that was a quick overview of months of work. The budget before council was built through collaborative efforts of all departments and continues to reflect our strategic priorities of good governance and fiscal responsibility. In order to achieve a balanced budget with an adjustment under 7%, staff want to ensure council and the community are aware of the value of items that were deferred to 2024. In total, over $788,000 in costs were deferred for reconsideration within our 2024 budget, and staff look forward to getting an earlier start to the budget in 2024 in the hopes that with additional context, the Township will reach budget approval earlier within the fiscal year next year. I'd like to conclude just by thanking my colleagues on corporate leadership team and the staff present tonight, and all those across the organization for their support in putting this budget together. Special thanks to my group, or my team in corporate services, for all the work they do behind the scenes to make this possible. And finally, to you, Council, thanks for your support through what was a challenging budget year for your first budget and your continued shared desire to meet the service levels for Wilmot in a responsible manner that's balanced. And with that said, I'll hand it over to CAO Chambers for some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Director Kelly, and through you, Mayor. I want to echo Director Kelly's comments. There's certainly a lot of work that goes into developing the annual budget, and I want to thank both council and staff for your efforts over the past few months to get us to the point where we are approving the budget this evening. The municipal budget is a very important document. Through it, we establish our annual work program, and we allocate resources toward the delivery of services and programs that residents and businesses rely on every day. Through the capital budget, we renew existing infrastructure and we build new infrastructure that will help our community grow and prosper. Since December, we've had some really good discussion around the horseshoe here about growth-related pressures and the need to prioritize service delivery and projects over the next few years until we are able to start collecting growth-related revenues. In order for council to make informed decisions, you need good information in front of you, and as Director Kelly said, now that we're wrapping up the 2023 budget, we're already looking forward to the 2024 budget. We may take a slight break, like maybe a week or so, but we are committed to revamping that budget process for future years to start early and provide more time for analysis and prioritization. Budget decisions impact the services and programs that are provided to the community, as well as those major infrastructure projects that are going to be built. And yet, we are still seeing a low number of people viewing our virtual budget meetings. And Mayor Sellon and I have talked about that quite a bit. I think it's really timely that we had the Red Brick presentation on the community communication and engagement strategy this evening, because it's going to be very important to make an effort to improve citizen engagement on the budget process going forward, to ensure that the decisions that council is making are the right decisions for the citizens of Wilmot. And I very much look forward to working with council staff and the community to support this work going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and just to also echo that, thank you very much, staff, for going through this entire process and answering all of our questions, as I know they were many and some very difficult, and we really appreciate how open you guys were in this conversation and accommodating. And thank you also, council, for the great discussions that we've had in committee over the past few months, and hopefully we can put this to bed, and I'm very much looking forward to saying that we have passed the budget in hopefully a few minutes. But before that, does council have any questions or comments to make before we vote? Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'd like to echo some of your comments there, and just definitely appreciate the hard work that staff put in, as well as the understanding that was granted to us given the working through this process. I think now, we can say with confidence that we are turning the page and moving forward to look at how we can identify new revenue streams. And quite frankly, this council inherited some very challenging circumstances with regards to taking on debt for the first time in a long time last year, as well as overall lack of resources available to this township. So, I thank everybody for their hard work, and we turn our attention now to this council making it our job to fix some of the challenges and issues, and we'll ask the general public for patience and understanding as we embark on this process and get it done over the next 4 years. So thank you to everyone, and look forward to getting this passed as well.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments or questions? All right, seeing none, I will call the vote. All of those in favor of passing our budget, and that passes unanimously. I feel that you can breathe over there a little bit, Director Kelly. Jumping into agenda item 13, which is correspondence. Just to make note that council did receive 2 additional pieces of correspondence today, one from Angie Hallman regarding item 12.6 on the council agenda, and another from Neil Hofstetter regarding item 12.2 on the agenda items. And the clerk will include those in the minutes to form part of the public record for this evening's meetings. And I am actually going to ask Director Kelly to just discuss a little bit more correspondence item 13.1 and what this means for our township moving forward.
Sure, thank you, Mayor Salonen. So after hearing the outcome noted within the correspondence from the Municipal Tax Advisory Group, discussion occurred amongst the area townships to get a better understanding of the potential for advancement with appeals on the subject properties. So to date, North Dumfries has agreed to move forward with submitting appeals, given the number of gravel pits we have within Wilmot Township and the potential financial impact it can have. The township's corporate leadership team has also endorsed proceeding with appeals on behalf of Wilmot. Given the lack of resources that we have internally to support the filing and managing of those appeals, we are going to reach out to the Municipal Tax Advisory Group for assistance in submitting appeals. This also has the benefit of their depth of resources in undertaking a comprehensive review of all gravel pit operations within the township's boundaries to ensure they are captured and assessed properly. As indicated in the letter, in order to capture the most benefit in recovery of assessment, appeals need to be submitted by March 31st. So although right now we can't readily estimate the total increase, we currently expect to see an overall financial benefit from those appeals within Wilmot.
That's great. Thank you very much, Director Kelly. And Councillor Cressman?
Yes, as I understand, we haven't heard back about whether the region of Waterloo will be joining us as the County of Wellington were the original organization that carried the appeal process forward, created the case law, I guess, to to fundamentally provide us with this opportunity. So do we anticipate hearing from them, or are we going to have to go this alone without the region? I'm looking specifically at my regional representative.
I mean, through you, Mayor Sallin, I might be able to make a quick comment, just that we do have a meeting scheduled this week with all of the treasurers from each of the municipalities, including the region, and this topic will be there for discussion. But I agree, we do have a regional representative within the room who also has been briefed on the subject. So I'll hand it back to you, Chair Sallin.
Well, no, I don't feel like I'm on the hot seat, but yes, this is something, it hasn't directly come up at Regional Council yet, but it is something that I will be continuing to investigate, as I do think, as you said, Wellington County was the one that originally put forward this proposal, so especially as there would be a windfall to the region, I would like to see a contribution. Now, Councillor Martin, did you have any comments on correspondence this evening?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sallin. I did want to acknowledge that we received about 40 letters regarding the Hallman pit, and I want to express appreciation to all of the people for submitting their letters. There's a lot of passion, a lot of energy, interest in the environment, interest in people's health, and I'm hoping that they take their letters to the province. There has been comments made that, I'll speak for myself, and that's what I'm doing here. I appreciate your comments that you made, Mayor Sallinen, a few weeks ago, where you spoke for us as council. Tonight I'm speaking for myself and saying, yes, I did make a promise during the election. Then some things changed. Bill 23 came in, which was after the election. New information came in terms of the legal advice. And so I'm really encouraging people to take the concerns to the province where the Aggregate Act is governed and where concerns can be dealt with. And so I'm hoping that they take their letters forward that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors have comments on any of the correspondence before we move along? All right, seeing none. Item 14 is the bylaw. However, as we did add the Lunar New Year, which was not already included in the bylaw, it will be coming back to council to be read for first, second, and third time, so there is actually no bylaw to pass right now. We have no notice of motions. Do any council members have announcements they'd like to share? All right, I do actually have one. I wanted to congratulate, it is my understanding that the New Hamburg Legion on the weekend hosted a provincial darts tournament, and my understanding is that our New Hamburg team has progressed along to nationals, so they will be going out to BC. So I just wanted to wish them good luck and congratulations. And Councillor Creston.
Excuse me. I would like to thank Community Services for the improvement to the stove in the New Dundee Community Centre. It came in handy on Sunday when we had a good turnout for our Board of Trade pancake breakfast, and the remarks were, boy, this stove works a lot better than the one, and there isn't cold spots in the area where the pancakes are, etc. So I want to thank Sandy and her Community Services for looking after that.
There's nothing worse than cold pancakes. I'm happy to help.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Salmon. I have an announcement about the New Hamburg Firebirds. They would like to call all our great fans to the Nest, the Wilmot Rec Center, for the start of our 22-23 playoffs. The Firebirds soared to the Doherty Division Regular Season Championship, and they've set their sights on repeating as playoff champions again this season. First game is set for this Wednesday evening, March the 22nd, 7:30 for the puck drop. The opponent is still to be decided, although maybe tonight it's known, I'm not sure by now, but when the email was sent this morning, we still didn't know. And so we're very excited and optimistic for another great playoff run representing Wilmot. Go Firebirds, go.
That's great. Well, good luck, Firebirds. I will be at Regional Council, but I hope anyone else in the community who's able to join can go support them. Is that all announcements that anyone had? Okay, great. And we had no closed session, so we have our confirmatory bylaw, and the recommendation is that the confirmatory bylaw as attached to this agenda be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. And lastly, to adjourn, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And we're adjourned. Thank you.